Welcome back to Business Beyond the Blunt. I am your host, Canna Breon, and on today we're here to really discuss some of the advocacy work that's being done inside the industry and the education that's being done behind it as well. Today on the show, we have a very special guest, a really great friends from Marijuana Matters. We have the one and only the Executive Director of Marijuana Matters, Courtney Davis. Ladies and gentlemen,
Hello. Thanks for having me.
how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. I'm so glad that you're able to join us on Business Beyond the Blunt today. So before we really get into it, I know about what you do, but could you please tell the guests what do you do at Marijuana Matters and how you got into the advocacy space for cannabis?
Yeah. Well, like I said, thanks for having me. Very happy to see how you've grown since I met you last year. I'm very grateful to see that. And, a lot of the work that we do exists so that these type of opportunities are provided for individuals such as yourself to get into this industry in a way that makes sense for your skill set. So I'm glad when you hit me up, I was like, oh my gosh, look at what he's doing, so clap it up for you.
Thank you.
But so Marijuana Matters is a social enterprise organization. We are about 3 years old, based in Washington, D.C., and we essentially work to create to ensure that social equity is the cornerstone of the legalized cannabis industry. And we do that work through education, advocacy, and entrepreneurship. Those are our three pillars. And we really help individuals. We have three core groups of folks that we believe have a responsibility to create an industry that does no more harm. And so we do a lot of educating of community members, helping them to understand what happens when legalization happens in a place where they live, what opportunities are available in the plant touching and ancillary space, and also how can they show up and ask for things that would create equity in this industry. We also have relationships with public institutions and regulators and decision makers, because they're the ones that are creating these policies. And so we have recommendations for what we think the industry could look like based on the role that they play. And then also business owners, mostly the individuals that have been successful or have had the opportunity to create a business, mostly in the plant touching space. We think that they have a responsibility to, almost like a corporate social responsibility for their business that's specific to cannabis. And, what does that look like? What are your policies on restorative justice, community reinvestment, and economic opportunity? So those are the things that we focus on. We understand that legalization is happening. So we don't have to be the ones that say, I support legalization. We're supporting the legalization that is already taking place in this country.
Right. So what was your background? So a little bit before you even got into the industry, what were you doing before?
Prior to this, I was working on Capitol Hill. I worked for Senator Bennett from Colorado for about 8 years. And I focused on policies related to agriculture, veterans affairs, defense. I did a little bit of transportation. Sometimes when you work on the Hill, depending on how senior you are when you come in, or in my case, how junior you are, you get whatever somebody doesn't want to work on,
right.
Those here, work on this, those are the policies that you get. And then the longer you work there, unless you come in with, a law degree or a master's degree, or you're, retired military official, like it makes sense that you have a subject matter expertise in a subject already. So I had a chance to work on a number of different policies, and really became interested in agriculture work. My boss was on the Farm Bill, was on the Agriculture Committee And the Farm Bill is one of the few bills at the time that I was there that has that moves forward every couple of years. And so it's when you work on the Hill, there's a difference in working on an issue area that your boss is not on a committee for, because when bills come to the floor, when you get to create those bills, you're involved in the committee process. And so committee members have a little bit more jurisdiction over those issue areas. And so I was really interested in staying on an issue that my boss was on committee. And so I had the chance to work on the 2014 Farm Bill that authorized industrial hemp. And so that was really cool. And then, in 2012, Colorado had legalized cannabis and for adult use. And I was like, you know what, this is, when you work on the Hill, you kind of are trying to figure out, am I going to be a lifer, or Hill rat, as they call them? If I just end up being the chief of staff, get my 30-year pin, do I want to go to the administration? Do I want to go to K Street?
Right.
And as I was leaving towards the end of 2019, I was like, there's all this cannabis stuff going on. Maryland had a medical program, and they had, because of how their rollout was, they didn't have any licenses for persons of color. And we all know the statistics of Maryland and wealth for Black people. So they had they passed this bill that created this education grant. And that's how I met Kevin Ford from Uplift. And so I said, you know what, Courtney, working on the Hill, you learn all about networking. So I'm like, I have no intention of applying for a license, but I'm going to go to these classes. I'm going to meet people, let people know what I'm interested in doing policy. I'm in DC. I didn't necessarily want to move. And so I just tried to finagle my way into a position, and I ended up on LinkedIn looking for jobs because 3 years ago, it's still pretty challenging to find cannabis careers that in the ancillary space. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of websites you can go to, LinkedIn, but it's very hard to find. And so I basically typed in all the keywords, cannabis, marijuana, green, whatever, leaf, in Washington, D.C., and Marijuana Matters popped up. And I always joke because I'm like, LinkedIn needs to pay me for this story, because I reached out to Marijuana Matters, who was Khadijah Tribble, and basically told her, and this was in 2018, I told her what I was thinking about doing, what I was interested in, and how I wanted to get involved in like this kind of equity conversation that was emerging. And she was like, I don't have any money to pay you, but I guarantee you in a couple of years, every major consulting firm is going to have a cannabis division, and they're going to need policy professionals like yourself. And at the end of 2019, we had kept in touch. I was able to, I had given myself a timeline that I was leaving the Hill. I was like, I don't care if I have a job or not, I'm leaving. And I had an offer at an ag firm. And then I had Khadijah, who was kind of lingering, and she's like, I think I got something for you, give me a couple months. And I basically was like, I took a chance on faith. I turned the ag position down, and I ended up working for Marijuana Matters right before the shutdown of the pandemic.
That is really, really good. This is glad to hear that you got right involved and didn't get deterred and really wanted to still stay the course. While we're at it, I give a huge shout out to Miss Khadijah Tribble, ladies and gentlemen. She is the CEO of the United States Cannabis Council, and also serves as the Senior Vice President for corporate and social responsibility for Curaleaf. That's really, really huge shout out to her. So, as we've already discussed, your introduction into the regulated cannabis industry, what was your feels around getting into it, though? Were you comfortable with it? Were your family comfortable with it? You about to go out here and work for the weed people? What was that like?
Yeah, all of the above. you know, my family is super supportive. My mom was very concerned that I was turning down a job for something that wasn't tangible, and that had a stigma attached to it. But I think she trusted me enough to know that I was kind of onto something. And so, you know, but like sometimes your extended family is okay, but it's like your grandma, your great aunts or whatever, the ones who you're like afraid to,
Right.
you know, start posting all this weed stuff, especially because so much of the work we were doing then was just on social media. So, you know, we're posting all this stuff about weed and everybody's seeing it. They're like, what the hell is Courtney doing? You know? And I even had someone the other day ask me, he was like, and this is someone that I know from Capitol Hill. And he was like, oh, would you consider working for any of the other like sin industries? And that's the way that he was like, you know, alcohol, tobacco. And I was like, I hadn't even really, I mean, people are still putting cannabis in the category of, you know, a drug or wanting to regulate it like alcohol and tobacco. Mm-hmm. And so I like to think that because of my professional background, that I helped to legitimize the industry and contribute to the destigmatization that's taken place. Because I remember when I was working on the Hill and we would take meetings with folks that were lobbying for cannabis. I mean, you'd get the big blunts and they're wearing suits that have the cannabis leaves all over it. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, because traditionally the industry was advocating for freeing the plant. Mm-hmm. But now we have a lot more nuance involved. And so, you know, when I tell people what I actually do, mm-hmm. and then, you know, all these states are legalized, you know, my family's from out west, so, you know, California, Colorado, and they're all like, oh yeah. And then, you know, I got people texting me like, I got this idea, like, I'm thinking about starting this kid. You know, what do you think? So people are curious. I think the more of us that decide to just come out and stand firm and say, you know what, this is a legit industry. You know, I had a kid who will be 2 next month. You know, like I'm able to pay my bills. I pay my taxes. You know, like I'm working.
Right.
I'm working in a legitimate industry, and people see the way I'm operating. And what can you say? That I'm getting ready to get on crack? Like, no. You know, so some of that stuff just doesn't even resonate anymore. You know, it just doesn't make sense. We just got to keep moving past that. And we do that by educating and then just deciding to get into this space.
Right. So as we continue on that education piece, can you speak of some of the education that Marijuana Matters provides and do in the community, throughout the community?
Yeah. We just do everything from keeping folks informed about which states are legalizing, what the public comment periods are, what we think people should call in and ask for, you know, reach out to your congressman or reach out to your local council member. We do a lot of education, and, you know, it's kind of like the education and advocacy side. Mm-hmm. You know, we were a part of a coalition of advocacy groups last year. They were pushing for safe banking in Congress. And so, you know, through the work in those type of campaigns, we're keeping folks informed in our newsletters, also through social media, you know, which is really a big way that folks communicate, that organizations communicate with their supporters. We also have a lot of panels that we host on a number of issues. Like, you know, last September, we participated in Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and we had a really good conversation with registered nurse Rebecca Abrams, who owns a business called Acute on Chronic, where they help people or patients figure out what their medical marijuana plan is going to be. And then we had a sickle cell advocate and patient who came on and talked about his journey to using cannabis as for pain management and also just for, mood stabilizers and mood enhancers. Sickle cell is something that predominantly impacts Black and Brown Americans. So that is the lane that we're in. We're in the equity lane. Everything that we do, we see it through an equity lens. So we want more states to include sickle cell on their list of approved conditions for their medical marijuana programs. And we want more sickle cell patients to think about how they can use, how cannabis can help with their health and wellness journey. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really important role that we play because of the type of constituents or supporters that we have. We're trying to help Black and Brown people. Yeah. And so we focus on a lot of topics that can kind of that are part of those intersectionalities that we know that they have, the LGBTQIA community, understanding their relationship with cannabis and how we can, enhance that. So those are some of the kind of, we get a little bit into the health and wellness space, and we like to partner with groups that have that medical background. I'm not going on and pretending like I'm a patient advocate or whatever, there are folks that are well more versed in that topic. And so what we're trying to do is find those partnerships, pull those folks from out of the shadows. Because I remember what it was like when we first started and we had hardly any followers and people are like, who is this? What are y'all talking about? And can I get an eighth because your name is Marijuana Matters? Like, you guys got to be the plug,
Too funny.
So helping to, build our status and reputation. And we can do that by partnering with other folks that we see out there that we think has something to say that people should, be able to hear. And then another way that we really educate folks is just, how can you participate in this industry?
Right.
There are so many opportunities, but I think people get stuck on the conversations about licenses, which we wholeheartedly support. We believe that contributes to economic opportunity, but we also like to think about licenses and beyond. And, how can you, we have a boot camp that we ran 2 years ago. And we selected 5 women, and it's a mix of these entrepreneurs that are doing plant touching, ancillary. We have someone who's a compliance lawyer who helps folks with their applications, someone that does education work in Maryland, and someone that has a CBD line that, is looking to apply for licenses in New York. So we want to support entrepreneurs in this space and also help folks understand that when we think about social equity and equity in this space, that we're not only talking about cannabis, we're talking about the opportunity to repair the harms from the war on drugs through cannabis legalization. And that also includes, it's the entrepreneurship side, also the community reinvestment side, and restorative justice.
Right. So out of all of those, because that is some really high priority, but also the most important things I think that have to combat social equity inside of cannabis to ensure it at least. Just from that, what do you believe that an equitable market should and does look like?
I think an equitable market looks like, I think people that have cannabis-related charges should be free from jail, prison records cleared, and given opportunities to participate in the industry or learn a skill that can lead them to financial freedom in another way. Because, we talk a lot about collateral consequences, which are the things that happen to you after your sentence. And a lot of people struggle with that. And that could last for decades after being released, or even just having a, charge on your record. I think that it has a very diverse set of entrepreneurs in this space that look like you and me, that are Black and brown women, men, Asian as well, and Indigenous. I think that it's really hard and illegal to exclusively set aside opportunities for a particular race of people. But I think that when you look at the communities that were marginalized by the war on drugs and by the prohibition of the plant, that it's only fair, and the statistics show that those were mostly persons of color. Right. So how are we, if we're creating equity, how do we get those people and those communities, how do we use cannabis for some sort of reparations for those? And so I think that we see a majority of cannabis tax dollars going towards restoring those communities in a way that makes sense for them. If there are, again, I go back to like collaboration and intentional partnerships. There are so many nonprofits that have been doing the work that we're talking about in these, has been running expungement clinics. Like, let's fund those folks. We don't need every MSO or every group to do an expungement clinics, allow these organizations that have existed and that have lived in these communities and know what their needs are to be able to participate in a legitimate way, by receiving some funding from the tax sales of cannabis. I think that it's really important to make sure that we don't forget that piece, because that is one of the reasons why so many states are deciding to legalize this, is because they're adding up the dollars and cents and seeing what the tax revenues can get them. And then they want to spend it on things that can help balance the state's budget, as opposed to using an equity lens and understanding that, no, this is what you need to do first. Take care of these communities first, make them whole, and then whatever else money is left, pave some roads. I don't know.
Right. Totally feel you on that. They want everything to go inside the general fund. What can we do? What can we do to make our money, our bottom line, go up every year? Totally understand, because I do believe that the fund should be reinvested back into the communities which the most harm was caused and done to. For you, being in an ancillary position, what does it mean for you to be Black in the industry?
I think it speaks volumes, really. I mean, I talked a little bit about it earlier, but just me being legitimate in this space, it means a lot to folks that are making these decisions. When I take meetings on the Hill with CBC members, they're super excited to see a Black person there, and they'll be honest with these companies. Bring me somebody that looks like me for me to talk to. You know what I mean? Like, they are very clear. I think everyone understands now that this is, the industry has an opportunity, all the projections, the green rush and everything. We're talking about money here, and they want to be able to establish the equity in the industry. So I think it's really important for me to be in these space, to be in these rooms, to be a part of the decision-making process for a brand new industry. I mean, everyone has a lot of ideas about how to create a new market. And we want to make sure that there's a diverse group of minds and thought leaders that are making these decisions. And most of the time they don't look like me. So I feel like I have an important role to play and want to share that space with others. I've met a phenomenal group of Black women and men and my Latino sisters and brothers that, when we see each other, it's just like, okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one here, because sometimes, and especially in the equity space, because like I said, like I have a policy background, but sometimes when you're in cannabis and you're talking to, white people, they only want to talk to you about social equity, or, they think that that's, they want you to be on a panel, but they want you to talk about social equity. They don't want to talk about, marketing or policies or anything like that, which I think, I hope changes, in the future, because a lot of the Black people that are in this space do kind of get pushed into that DEI role.
Right.
Not that we can't assume the position, but there are other things that we're talented in and that we could contribute to the industry as well.
Right. Don't just make me a token.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I'm here to do the real work. It wasn't just, as you say, I'm not here just to do DE&I. Mm-hmm. I can do it.
I don't even have a DEI certificate, so don't think that I'm a specialist. So.
Right. Right. Not at all. I just so happen to be Black.
Right.
I just so happen to
real
be
life
Black.
Experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's my only qualification, to be honest. But I do understand that, and just really trying to shape and have that conversation, which goes right into it. What is social equity?
What is social equity? Social equity is the equitable distribution of resources. And it's like a term that has been around for a while. It's not specific to cannabis. I believe its origins are like several decades ago. But, there's like this little chart that they kept floating around during the pandemic. And it's like equality. You probably saw it. It's like a little boy, two boys standing on like a fence trying to look at this baseball game. And it's like equality, giving everybody the same amount of stairs to look over, but the white boy is already here. The Black boy is already down here. And equity is like helping to level the playing field by giving each person what they need based on where they are.
Right.
So it's hard to just put a blanket, to make like blanket statements and say, everybody gets this. Right. Because there are some that need a little bit more because of, their record, their collateral consequences. They haven't been able to fully participate in any industry because of the war on drugs in these communities. And so that's essentially what it is. It's just about equity.
And just everyone having a shot, and almost in a way, it's almost like guaranteed inclusion. Just allow me the opportunity, and truly to see what comes from that. If I don't do good, I don't do good. But if I do great, you got to give it to me.
Yeah, like
at least give me the
technical assistance and money and a mentor. Somebody else might just need a mentor. They already got the money and the technicals. They already got the MBA from Wharton. But this is what I need, and I'm have a right to be in this space because of what has happened with the government. These are all government policies. I think a lot of times we are pushing hard on the industry, but the government is the one that created these laws and these systems. Capitalism is going to exist regardless. These business owners aren't the ones that put anybody in prison. But it's always shitting on MS all the time. Right. Some of them deserve it, but it's like, let's focus on how we can make change happen.
And that's really all it is. and change for the better, and not just for one set of people, but for everybody. I think everyone has a fair opportunity, a fair shot and chance. In your opinion, is there any markets that show any, any advancement for social equity as you've seen it being playing out?
I think there are a lot of good examples of state policies that have worked. I do think that it's very young. I mean, the industry is very young to determine success. You know, one of the things that we advocate for is, you know, including data in these laws, like making sure that we're actually following the policies that they're creating what we intended them to do. And so I don't know if no one can really say like, this is actually working yet, because I remember when I first started, like everybody was like, oh, Illinois. They did it through the state legislature. They got this, I got this reparations bill in Evanston. They got this. And then they botched the whole license rollout. I mean, and there's some Black people that just got their licenses like last year.
Yeah.
And now everybody's like, New York, they've got this $200 million fund that is now struggling. So I think that one, we've got to give folks grace, give the states an opportunity to figure it out, to fail, as long as we continue to keep taking a bite at the apple, as long as we don't say, here's how this market's going to be set up, and then leave it and forget about it.
Right.
I really like some of the ideas that came out of Oakland, which were supported by the local public and the local decision makers there. They put money behind it, the shared kitchen idea that allowed these entrepreneurs to basically create like a shared kitchen food hall type of situation. We know the rent is high as hell out there and in a lot of other places where minorities live. And the real estate requirement, removing that is like a major, removing a major burden to opportunities for entrepreneurs. So I really like the way that, the state owned the building and then they allowed some folks to manage it. And then they had this incubator program. Like those are the type of ideas and really creative, outside of the box things that I like, the idea of micro licenses, the idea of exclusive licenses, for certain groups of people. I like that. But one thing I do think that we could do a little better job of is like being more realistic with how much revenue or how much profit we're expecting folks to make. If you have a delivery business, like you should expect to make between, 75 and 150 a year.
Right.
I don't know if there's a way to kind of determine those projections, but there's so much excitement about the industry as a whole that everybody just think they're about to get paid. And then they get these licenses and they're not making any money or, as much money as they thought they were,
Right.
So I think setting expectations and thinking outside of the box and, calculating the data, we should do health equity studies to see if any of these health issues that are affecting Black and Brown people, now that there is a medical marijuana program in this state, like what type of an impact is this making? These are the groups of people that we're, trying to bring up a little bit. Is it working? So those are some of the things that I think we should be focusing on. Some states have done some aspects of those, but it's really hard to say like, New York got it right. They also have a super progressive state legislature. New York's policy is not going to look anything like, I don't know, Pennsylvania or...
You can throw out Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, You guys are just wild out there.
They trying. That's all I can say. They trying.
Yeah, they are trying. Same with Maryland. So I think, and it's the same for other industries. There's some states have Medicaid expansion. They decide to put more of their budget towards expanding Medicaid. Other states are not spending their money in that way.
Right.
So, we can expect states to create policies that reflect the need and wants of their constituents, which, we hope to influence with our work.
Right. So as we talk about that, I guess going off into the advocacy side of things, what do you believe the importance of advocacy is?
I think it's crucial to change. I think that it's a big part of the political process, being civically engaged, signing up for something that you care about that's happening in a place where you live. A lot of times a policy comes through and it's signed into law and people all of a sudden they're like, what? I gotta do this, or what the hell is this on my water bill? And it's like, well, they kind of talked about this 2 years ago. They said it was gonna come into effect. They were asking people to come. And I get it. My friends and I have this debate all the time, especially after Donald Trump, where we're just like, oh my God, what happened? And everybody's like, you guys live in the Beltway, in a bubble. Like, you gotta meet people where they are. And I think that we all have to do a better job of trying to help folks understand what's going on and making it relatable to them. Why should I care about this? A lot of what some folks would say that kind of like the entryway into this conversation is through the health and wellness lens. Like, everybody can understand that. We have family members that are on medication. A lot of people in my family come to me because they can't sleep or they're on chronic pain medicine, and they like, I heard about these patches or this Sol that they can use. So I think, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but advocacy is really important. And it's not just speaking up, it's supporting political elected officials. Right. When these individuals get in these positions and start talking about the issues that you care about, you want to know that this is someone that thinks like me, or at least someone that is willing to listen. Some people, we've gotten just really, really partisan, and, to the point where you can't even try to compromise with another person on the other side of the aisle. So really being intentional about the folks that we're putting into office. And so when it comes time to talk about social equity, people aren't looking at you like, you want to let people out of prison? It's like, yeah, remember when we talked about this? I asked you at the debate, I sent you a letter, like, I'm involved. And I know that not everyone has a chance to do that, which is why we're trying to make it easier for people that don't have to go and search the federal registrar to know when public comment period is for something. Like, we are there to kind of be that gap, an information gap, and be that bridge for folks so that they can advocate for policies that they think are important.
Right. So as we begin to wrap up, can you tell us what's on the horizon for you and what's on the horizon for Marijuana Matters?
Well, we are doing some interesting things. We are set to release a National Social Equity Certificate program, which is something that we have heard a lot from business owners that are looking to support equity and are like, or looking to, support equity, social equity, and want to know how they can show up. I think sometimes, business owners are like, do I give to Last Prisoner Project? I'm just going to give $50,000 to LPP and like be done with it. But this is a way for us to identify individuals that are social equity applicants or business owners, which some of them live in states. Currently the only way that you are a social equity entrepreneur is if you live in a state and you have a license. There is no other designation for folks in the ancillary space or for folks that are living in a state that doesn't have a social equity program. So we're going to help to identify these folks. They will apply, answer a couple questions, check some documents. They get this nice little seal. Our partners, who are the individuals that help make this possible, are then going to be able to provide resources and services to these folks.
That's awesome.
It'll help create a more diverse supply chain, and we're still building out the programming and services, but, everything that we mentioned today, from technical assistance to intentional mentorships,
Right.
mentorships, people throw that word out there, but it is a big responsibility. Sometimes you just need somebody that you can talk to once a month, you know what I mean? Or just that you can text. It doesn't have to be every Friday for 2 hours, So really trying to match people up with someone. Can I send you my resume? Can you look at this really quick? And so building that community, that network of entrepreneurs that understand each other, that are committed to equity, and then being supported by the industry that is in the position to elevate their business and get their products on shelves, help them make those contracts. And so that's something that I've been working on. And Otra from Tetragram has done all the back end work for us and our website and the certificate and everything. So we're super excited to hopefully, by the time this airs, it will be live.
Yeah, that is awesome and good to hear. How can people get in contact with you and stay up to date with the work of Marijuana Matters?
Yeah, so we are really active on Instagram, Marijuana Matters DC. We're on LinkedIn, and we're also on Twitter at M2, which is like our pseudonym, because 2 M's, Marijuana Matters, M2_org. It's really hard when a lot of usernames are already taken. You just got to get creative. So we would love for folks to also visit our website, marijuanamatters.com. We have a newsletter that goes out every quarter. We send out emails for the events that we have. We'll be participating in. It just stresses me out thinking about April because there are so many things happening. National Cannabis Festival.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because my daughter's birthday is on 4/22, which is Earth Day. So like the whole month of April, I'm just, for the past 2 years, I've just been like, oh my gosh, there is so much going on. But yeah, we're participating in the Emancipation Day Parade in DC. Made in the DMV conference is also in April. So you'll get updates about all of those things and ways that we're showing up later on in the year as well.
Well, that is exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Courtney Davis of Marijuana Matters. Let's give it up for her one last time.
Thank you.
So as we get out of here, I want to use the great words of Todd Diddy. No one should be in jail for smoking weed. This is Canna Breon signing off saying, stay blazing.